are worth fighting for, if we've got to pull our kids out, if we've got to fight for our schools. And I think that all of these issues surround what is happening with the ESEA reauthorization, and also with WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Karen, I just want for you and Donna to know that your lines are unmuted, and please to feel free to chime in or ask any questions. Back to Anita, because one of the things that I think is so important with what Anita has laid out for us, in Texas, we just passed today HB4, which sets up basically using our state funds to implement this preschool education program. And one of the things that happened today during that debate, we have a great State Representative, Jonathan Stickland, who put forth a point of order to take the House Bill 4 back to committee. And one of the things that he pointed out is that in this state legislation for the preschool, pre-kinder program is that any preschool teacher would now be required, because of House Bill 4, to get a child, it's called a CDA, a Child Development Associate credential. And what is interesting about this is it sets up new credentialing for our preschool teachers, where they have to go through 120 hours of professional education, 480 hours of professional experience. By the way, that professional education here in Texas would come from our 20 education service centers that brought in the Common Core progressive teaching strategies into Texas. They'd also be required to complete a Pearson test, a exam through Pearson. When I heard this, after hearing and having you on our conference call last time, Anita, and talking about your concerns with the babies, with those preschoolers and their development, it just made me sick to my stomach. And so when you look at this federal legislation, whether it's the ESEA or even the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that sets up, it binds basically K through 12 education under the Labor Department, the Health and Human Services, and the Education Department. Am I right to be concerned, Anita, with what you have found in this latest version of both the House and the Senate version of the ESEA?
There's no doubt about it. Okay, you realize that when they say that teachers have to go back to school, they're re-educating the teachers, okay? Teachers know how to teach reading and writing and arithmetic. That's what they've been trained to do. So when teachers have to go back and be retrained, that's called re-education. And throughout this whole bill in ESA, it continues to say that teachers have to be trained in evidence-based criteria. And they also refer to it as fidelity. You have to have fidelity. And when you look at the criteria and the definition of fidelity, fidelity means that the teachers have to teach the criteria exactly as it has been researched. They can't sway or go beyond anything else except what is in front of them. They have to teach to the script. They have to teach to the test. Otherwise, the children are not going to meet the government objectives. So when you say that these preschool teachers have to be retrained, they have to be retrained in identifying and screening under these functional behavioral assessments all the criteria in the social, emotional, and behavioral aspects of the children. And again, if you want to see what that is, I would just Google News with Views. It's been on several articles that I've written on several magazines, but I use News with Views a lot. News with Views and Google Casey, which is Senator Casey, and that will bring up my article that I had written about all of the birth through pre-K universal daycare. So, yeah, you can have free pre-K, free daycare center if you gave your baby to psychological conditioning and research, and that's exactly what it is. And the teachers have to be retrained to identify. Now, let me just say one more thing about when I was talking earlier about identifying the children in screening, the functional behavioral assessment, the positive behavior interventions and supports that we're talking about. And these are all the same wording that is in the ESA reauthorization. So let's talk about how they identify a baby with a social, emotional, or behavioral kind of disability, because that's where the individual with disabilities education will identify the child. So if your baby cries when you leave, that's a parental withdrawal type of problem. Your child will get a check mark in the behavioral functional assessment. If your baby doesn't take a nap, if your baby cries, if your baby bites someone, oh boy, you better look out. Okay? These are the criteria. Now, understand when I say your baby gets a check mark, or if you're in school, say your little second grader goes out on the playground and little Susie kicks someone before they go up and line up to go down the sliding board or to swing on the swing. Well, your Susie has potential aggressive behavior. Okay? If little Johnny pushes someone in line at the cafeteria, that's potential aggressive behavior. All of these behavioral aspects will be monitored. When you also go to that article that I had referred to, there was this BOSS app, BOSS, that was actually developed in Pennsylvania, but for Pearson. This app, which is a phone app, monitors children's behavior in the classroom. So if Johnny looks out the window, isn't paying attention to the teacher, he gets a check mark. If he wiggles in his seat and his butt isn't up against the seat, that's a check mark. Again, if they do anything that's aggressive behavior, pushing someone in the hall, turning around in their seat, talking out of turn, these are all check marks. Now, when your child is identified, usually it's through response to intervention. Lately they're calling it multi-tiered system of supports. They're changing the name so that you can't follow along. What that means is that your child will be identified for interventions, and there's 3 levels of interventions. The first level of intervention is for all children because all children are at risk. The second level is for those individual children who need a little bit more special psychological help. And then the third level is called intensive. This would be the same criteria for babies, 3 levels of intervention. But when you go back to those check marks, when your child gets a check mark, that to bill for Medicaid, that is called a DSM code, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. So what that means is your child is coded for a mental disorder. What does that mean for the future of your child? It's unbelievable. It could mean anything from never owning a gun, right? If you have a mental disorder, you're not going to be able to own a gun. It could be a driver's license. It could be getting a job. We have no idea in the future what these codes are going to mean for the future of our children. But this is the criteria that is being brought forward in this new Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the new ESA reauthorization, is jam-packed full of mental health. On page 106, you can refer to any number of children who could be eligible under the Medicaid programs. It says it outright. It's mental health wraparound services that are being implemented. Now, something that's really important, too, there is a section, or several sections actually, where private schools are going to be given choice. Okay, and these private schools, they're actually referring to it as Title I portability, where the money does follow the child, except that Title I portability is the services. So the choice is the service that will follow the child. The child is at risk because they're not meeting Common Core. 45 states have accepted Common Core in one way or the other. It's a contract that 85% of their standards have to meet the Chief State School Officer's copyright and the National Governors Association copyright. So you only have 15% leeway to add or subtract any of those standards. Every child is at risk under Title I. So Title I portability going to any school, especially a private school, a religious school, a Catholic school, a Christian school, are the services. It's called Direct Student Services, and that was in H.R. 5. But in the Senator Alexander's bill, he just refers to it under Section 1114, which is what I had explained to you earlier, which was the school identification of interventions and supports, which is the psychological services. So what that means, when that follows the child into that private school, they will mandate the exact same services to be equitable as the same in public school. So that would mandate the same psychological service to meet the same social, emotional, and behavioral aspects of all children in private schools also. This is the criteria that is it's very clear in this legislation of what this means. And I do not think that anyone wants this kind of choice for their children. This kind of choice is federal and government control. This will nationalize education in the entire whole United States. Every school will become a public school under this legislation. So, what we need to do is, yes?
Go ahead, Anita.
Well, and the other really important thing is that the early childhood ed that Senator Murray wanted and Senator Casey is throughout this legislation. So the preschool, universal pre-K, is throughout the entire whole piece of legislation. It remarks again and again about all at-risk children not meeting state standards. It continues to say non-academic skills. On page 119, it talks about the multi-tiered system of support, which is the response to interventions, positive behavior interventions and supports, early intervening services. On page 120, non-academic skills. When have we ever mandated that the government can legislate specific standards and attitudes, values, beliefs, and dispositions? On page 140, it's a public school choice. Okay, this is where it talks about the option to transfer to the public school. But on page 162, it talks about the participation of children in private schools. The exact same criteria, section 1114, which is the interventions and supports. Page 244, non-academic skills continue to be listed under learning readiness and needs assessment. Page 253 included, again, multi-tiered system of supports, positive behavior interventions and supports, and students with disabilities. One other little thing I wanted to say